Welcome to the Goldenberg Destiny Project. Previous episode we spoke about the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Today I'd like to speak about what they received. What is the Torah? So at Mount Sinai, they didn't get very much. They just got the 10 Commandments, Aseret HaDibros, and that's it. Everything else they got over a period of time. Throughout the time that they were in the desert, they got it piecemeal. But really what they got at Sinai, which we spoke about in the last episode, was that they were given this divine power of Torah, which is the power to enter the divine mind and explore the mind of God. That is not the thing itself, that is the power, but not the actual laws. That they were given completely. And that was the ring. That was what forged the marriage, the marriage between God and the Jewish people. The giving of the ring that forged that was the giving of the Torah, and that was complete, and now it was totally in the possession of the Jewish people. However, what does the Torah say? What is there? We have to go into the mind and explore it. So that came little by little. At Mount Sinai, they only got the Aseret HaDibros, the 10 Commandments, that was revealed, and the rest was later. Now, there are two parts to the Torah. There is the Torah Shebeksav, the written Torah, and there is the Torah Shebal Peh, which is the oral tradition, which is transmitted verbally, orally, from generation to generation, and was never written down until 1,500 years later. And when we get to that time, Talmudic period, we will discuss what is the relationship between the Oral Torah and the Written Torah, and why it was not written down till then, and why it was written down then, and at what form it was written down. But in the meantime, there are two. Now, the Torah itself, the Written Torah, obviously needs the Oral Torah, because when the Torah says you should put on tefillin, we have no idea what tefillin are, so how do we know? So you need a parallel Oral Torah which tells you how to put on tefillin. The Torah says that if you're Machal Shabbos, desecration of Shabbos is a capital offense, and that's all it says. But what is desecration of the Shabbos? How do we know? You read the pasuk, you read what it says in the Torah, we have no idea what it means. So again, we need the Oral Torah to tell us what it is. In fact, sometimes the Torah itself makes a reference to the Oral Torah. The Torah says, "V'zovachta kasher tzivisicha v'yachalta," that you should slaughter an animal. That's talking about how you get kosher meat. You slaughter the animal as I instructed you. Where was he instructed? There's no reference anywhere in the Torah what the method of kosher slaughtering is, not there. So the Gemara says in Chulin that was Zabachta. Here you see that God told Moshe that you have to do the esophagus and the trachea and all the rules of how you do kosher slaughtering. So not only do we need the Oral Torah to tell us, but the Torah itself references the Oral Torah and tells us that that's where we know what to do. Now, the main part of the Torah is the Oral Torah. It's not the Written Torah, because the Oral Torah stands on its own. The Oral Torah doesn't need the Written Torah. The Written Torah, however, does not stand on its own. Without the Oral Torah, the Written Torah doesn't mean anything. So the main Torah is the complete body of the Torah, which is contained in the Oral Torah. The Written Torah is a record of hints and allusions. Sometimes it tells you things that are very specifically, and sometimes they're only allusions, sometimes they're only hints, and the Oral Torah contains the system of how to interpret all these hints and how to find them. Now, why are these? Again, when we get to the time of the Talmud, we will talk about that. The Written Torah could not have contained all the information that's there in the Oral Torah because how would you get all of that into a Torah scroll? You would need 100 Torah scrolls 1,000 Torah scrolls. So that's not possible. But the question is, the written Torah is the Torah scroll. This has like a capsule of the Torah, and it's all in there, in addition to the stories and the blessings and the Musar. All the things are in there, and that is contained, the written Torah, and that is what people can hold and put it in the Aron Kodesh and take it out. It's in the Aron in the Mishkan. There was a written Torah lying there. That was the entire Torah encapsulated. But the Oral Torah is much more. So why isn't there a written record of the Oral Torah, which would be separate from the Torah scroll? You could have a Sefer Torah, but you could also have a written record, like Lahavdil, like you have a constitution, and then you have many law books that elaborate on, says due process of law. So then there's all kinds of law, case laws of what is due process, what's not due process. So why didn't we have an oral law also written? So there are a number of reasons for this. So one reason, I think it says in the Medrash somewhere, is for exclusivity, that we don't want that the non-Jewish world should have access to the Torah. They shouldn't have access. They could look in the written Torah, I guess, but they'll be able to get to the oral Torah. They cannot do that. So all they really need, it's not, the Jewish people are not out there to be evangelical and to convert all the non-Jews to Judaism. We are perfectly happy if all non-Jews will abide by the 7 laws, the 7 Noahide laws, the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noah, and they won't hit us. We're very happy with that. So all the rest of the Torah is really our own exclusive possession. We don't need to share that. We don't want to share that. And I think we even need to protect it from the malignant views of other people. So that's one thing. Another thing is that when you're teaching, so you imagine you have 2 people want to be doctors. One of them goes to medical school, a good medical school, and he goes to the great professors and lecturers, and he studies with them. And the other one buys that professor's book, and he reads it. So there's no comparison between the two. You would not go to the one who read the professor's book. You would go to the one that sat by the professor and listened to him and talked to him, got all the nuances, asked questions, back and forth. That is a much, much better way of teaching than by giving somebody a text. So once you take it, you reduce it to a text, it loses all its life. That's a second reason. A third reason is because the occupation of a Jew is to learn Torah. That's what he should do. Whatever you have to do to make a living is fine. You need to entertain yourself, okay, as much as the minimum that's needed. But the main occupation should be Torasei Kva, that the main occupation that you have is learning Torah as much as you possibly can. So if the Torah is written, then if it will be written down, then you're less likely to spend all your time learning it. You say, okay, I can just look it up. Okay. But I think that the main reason that the Torah Sheba'al Peh could not be written down was because it is impossible to do it. As we spoke last time, the Torah is Ayin Ponim LaTorah. There are 70 facets, and every facet has other facets. Every facet, there's infinite. We're talking about entering the mind of God and the thoughts of God, and they're infinite. There's no limit to them. So the Torah is a living thing. It is constantly growing, constantly developing. The Gemara says that when Moshe was in heaven, so God showed him Rabbi Akiva. He told him, take a peek into the future. You could watch Rabbi Akiva saying a shir to his Talmidim, to his students. And Moshe Rabbeinu, who received the Torah from God, is sitting there and observing this shir. and Rabbi Kiva is saying a shir, and he's saying all kinds of intricate things, and he's learning this and that, and he's studying the crowns of the letters, and he's all these kind of things, and Moshe Rabbeinu is sitting there, and he can't follow, and he said, I said, what is all this? What is all this? And he felt very disillusioned, very discouraged. But then one of the Talmidim asked him, where do you get this? And Rabbi Kiva said, Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. This comes from Moshe's Torah that he gave us by Sinai. So what he's saying basically is, even though Moshe himself did not know what he said, but everything that he said was an extrapolation of what Moshe said. So Moshe came down and he taught something, and then it was studied and discussed and argued, and new facets were considered and introduced and discussed, and it's a living thing, the Torah. It's not a static thing. It's a living thing, and it constantly grows. The Yerushalmi says that Kol Mash Talmud Vosik Otel Chadash, every good yeshiva bacher that says a good svara, a good teretz, it was all included in Moshe's Torah. Every bacher that says something, that says a pshat in the Tosfos, that's all comes from Moshe. What does that mean? That Moshe had no idea, he never even know what a Tosfos was. But everything, every layer, every level, every development, everything is all a development of what Moshe Rabbeinu brought down. Moshe Rabbeinu brought down basic halachas that he taught, basic concepts that he taught from the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and then it would continue to grow and to grow and to grow, and it's still growing, and it will continue to grow forever, because it's infinite, because everything that anyone says, if it is a legitimate Torah opinion, then it is, the Gemara says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Two people have an argument. One says, Asr, it's forbidden, says Mutter. Yeah. Elu ve'elu divrei, they're both the living word of God. What does that mean? So the Gemara has a problem with this only when we're talking about a specific thing that happened by Pelegish Begiva, the Gemara in the Gittin. A specific thing that happened, either this happened or that happened, can be both. Or the Gemara figures out a way that it could be both. But in general, it can be both. But when you're talking about a halacha, a rule, a concept, if you say it's forbidden, if that's based on a proper use of the tools of analyzing the Torah, then that is correct. That is a Torah thought. If you say it's forbidden and you're also using the proper tools, then that is also correct. So anything that anybody develops, anything that anybody discovers, anything that anybody extrapolates by using the proper tools is a legitimate Torah thought. So there's no limit to the size of the Torah. How could you write down the Torah? It's impossible to write it. So that's why the Oral Torah cannot be written. Even later when it was written, in the beginning they only wrote the Mishnah, then they wrote this. Even when they wrote the Gemara is not everything. The Gemara doesn't contain everything all the Rishonim say, and the Rishonim don't contain everything all the Achrayim say, and so it's just constant, and it grows, and it's voluminous, and it keeps growing, and it's a living thing. The Torah is a living thing. We are all inside the mind of God and studying His mind, and that is what learning Torah is. Now, after the giving the Torah at Mount Sinai, then the Jewish people remained in the desert for a while, and what they did was they learned Torah. They were taught Torah by Moshe, by his immediate Talmidim, by Elazar, by Aaron. They will learn Torah. The Gemara speaks about the system of how it was done. But they all learned Torah from Moshe. It's an incredible thing. Moshe got the Torah from directly from God, and everybody sitting there and learning Torah directly from Moshe, they had everything was taken care of. They had no needs. They ate man, and they drank the water from Be'er Shel Miriam, and then they are covered, and everything was idyllic. It was fantastic. You could you could sit there and nothing, no concerns, no worries, and learn Torah with Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, what could be better? What could be better? This is, and this is after you witnessed Matan Torah, which was prophecy. So you rose to the level of prophecy. You had a prophetic vision, a prophetic revelation, and then I'm assuming they're all intelligent people. So then you're sitting and using your intelligence and being taught Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. It is idyllic. It is fantastic. And in the classical Jewish tradition, that is called the Dor Deya, the learned generation. These people had become prophets, and they were learning from Moshe, and they were sitting there and learning, and they were considered like, we look up to them, the Dor Deya. At the same time, these people were constantly making trouble, constantly. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to heaven. He went up to Shemayim to get the Torah. After they were given the Seres of the verse, he went up to receive the rest of the Torah, or as much as he was given at different times. And he was there for 40 days. He said, I'm leaving now, I'll be back in 40 days. And they miscalculated, and they thought he was a day late. So he was a day late, 1 day late, right away reverted to becoming their old pagan habits. They made a golden calf, they made an egel, and they started worshiping the golden calf and this. Without getting into the complexities of what they thought. But what is this? Of course, all the Baal says, how could it be right after Matan Torah, right away you have an egel? But they had an egel, and then so the people that actually did it they died, they were killed. But it was only a couple of thousand, but there was like hundreds of thousands, millions of people there. So the rest of them, but they are considered guilty. The Jewish people carry the guilt of the chet of the egel for all generations. And okay, so it was over, fine. Then they're complaining about this. They don't have meat. They don't have water. They don't have this, and then they have the Meraglim came. They had to say, okay, we have to send spies. God didn't tell them to send spies, but they came to Moshe. We want spies. We want to check it out. The Meraglim came back, and they said a story that there was, this is a very difficult place. So right away they got upset and they want to go back. And how do you understand these two things? Where on the one hand they were at the highest level, you're sitting under the Anana covered, learning Torah from Moshe, and then every single time you're constantly doing things which you would consider inappropriate for such people on such a level. Imagine you're sitting and learning with Moshe Rabbeinu, and a problem comes up. Ask him, you first of all, you don't assault him, as they said, like Moshe Rabbeinu says, we want meat, and they almost stoned me. They almost stoned me. What is this? What kind of behavior is this for such people? And the other question I was thinking is that after the Meraglim, originally they were supposed to stay by Har Sinai for 2 years. And then after the 2 years, they were supposed to go to Eretz Yisrael, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they learned enough during those 2 years, and then they would continue learning Eretz Yisrael. In the end, they stayed in the Midbar for 40 years. That was their punishment because they listened to the Meraglim, they listened to the spies, and they wanted to turn back and not go to Israel. They were punished. They had to remain there for another 38 years until the entire generation the adult generation of that time died, and the next generation would come in. So by the Egel, that didn't happen. What he said? That God didn't say that. The whole generation was guilty, and obviously we carry the guilt for generations forever, but we weren't told that the whole generation had to die. No, they wouldn't have died. Okay, listen, God said, I'm going to destroy them. He didn't destroy them, fine, move on. But by the Meraglim, all of a sudden, why is it such a severe punishment to them? And what did they do? I mean, they said they accepted the slander of the Meraglim, of the spies. They told them they were never there. They never visited Israel. They didn't know what it looked like, what they lived there, what. They should have trusted. There was a lack of faith. I understand all that. But they messed up. They did a bad thing. But why is their punishment so severe, more than the punishment of the people by the Egel? So I think I would like to explain all this with the Rambam and the Moira. Oh, it's here. Let me get this. Yeah, if you can look it up in here, you can look it up. This is my abridgment of the Moira, of the Guide to the Perplexed. RabbiReinman.com, you can find it. And he says, the Torah says that God didn't, when they came out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, He didn't take them through the land of the Plishtim, because even though it was the shortest way, but He was afraid they would encounter war, and they would run away. They'd want to go back to Egypt. So the Rambam says, why didn't He just help them, give them courage? So he said the reason why he took them the other way, through the desert and the Midbar, is because it was not easy. I mean, you're at the middle of nowhere. And over a period of time that they're there, they would develop courage. And they would become, when they come into everything that He was doing was miraculous. He could have made them pass through Plishtim miraculously. But when they came into Canaan and they had to fight, they had to be warriors. They had to fight. They had to be courageous, and they were not courageous. They were emancipated slaves. They didn't have courage. That's why He took them into the desert, and that's where they would develop courage. This is what the Rambam says. So he says, so why didn't God give them courage? Could have given them courage. I mean, He split the sea. He couldn't give them courage. So he says that God can make all kinds of miracles, supernatural miracles, but He will never touch human nature. It's your own job to fix your human nature. He will not go into the person himself and fix his human nature. If a person lacks courage, he's got to find the courage himself. He may put him in a situation where he would find the courage, he would find it in himself to have courage, but God will never implant courage into a person. That is His own business. That's what the Rambam says. So really, what we were seeing here in the Midbar, in the desert where they were there, we were seeing the lack of courage of the people. The people came out and they were not equipped to deal with crises. They were not equipped to deal with it. They didn't have the courage. So whenever something happened, there was like, Moshe was a day late. Immediately they have it's catastrophe, it's anxiety, it's paranoia. They were not strong. They were as slaves. They were very regimented, and everything was exactly, they knew. I mean, it wasn't good, but they knew what would happen, where they would go, what they would do. And all of a sudden, when they came into they encountered the unknown, they couldn't handle it. They didn't know how to handle it. So Moshe is a day late. Panic. Why are you panicking? Because you're lacking the courage. Because you're an emancipated slave. You're panicking. So even though you're learning Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu, when you have no meat, you panic. And you harass Moshe and you assault him. What's going to be? We had meat and we had this. We have no meat. Everything was a dysfunctional reaction. They were put in a position where they had to be courageous. They had to be strong, and they were supposed to grow into that, and they had constant failures. When it came to the Meraglim, it was obvious that it's not going to work. Supernaturally, God is not going to make them have courage. Naturally, the whole process, for 2 years, and they still didn't have the courage, it's not going to happen. So if it's not going to happen, they are not capable of going into Canaan and fighting because they are not courageous. Therefore, he said, this whole generation is going to have to stay here until they die, and the next generation, which grew up free and not slaves, they are the ones that can find in themselves the courage, and they are the ones that will be able to go into Eretz Yisrael, into Canaan, and conquer it. This is with the Rambam. Thank you very much. I hope to see you next time. I'd like to invite you to visit me at RabbiReinman.com and explore all my works, both completed and still in progress, and kindly take the opportunity to lend your support on the participant page. Thank you very much, and be well.